Welcome to the Wine Lab. I'm your host, Andreea. When people first learn about Rioja, they're often taught to look for one of three words on the bottle: Crianza, Reserva, or Gran Reserva. Those words are indeed important. They tell us something about how long the wine has matured and how much of that time it's spent in oak. But Rioja has much more than an aging schedule. It's a long, narrow region in north-central Spain, shaped by the Ebro River and lying inland from the Bay of Biscay. Mountain ranges influence how Atlantic weather reaches the vineyards, while conditions become progressively warmer and drier towards the east. It's a place where medieval villages overlook vineyards, old underground cellars sit beside modern wineries, and fresh fruit can share the glass with vanilla, coconut, tobacco, dried flowers, leather, earth, and spice. Today, we're traveling to northern Spain to explore Rioja, its landscape, grapes, history, winemaking traditions, and evolving identity. And along the way, we'll discover how Rioja wine has found its way into poetry, music, festivals, and art. Let's begin with the landscape. Rioja follows the Ebro River across northern Spain. The wine region stretches for roughly 100 kilometers from west to east, with vineyards planted on both sides of the river and throughout several tributary valleys. Rioja is sometimes described as though it were one uniform place producing one recognizable wine style. In reality, it contains considerable variation in elevation, exposure, soil, rainfall, and temperature. The official region crosses several political boundaries, including La Rioja, the Basque Country, and Navarre. For wine, though, it's more useful to think about Rioja's three principal zones: Rioja Alta, Rioja Alavesa, and Rioja Oriental. The western part of Rioja receives more Atlantic influence. Conditions tend to be cooler, and the grapes can retain more acidity and aromatic freshness. As we move east, the Mediterranean influence becomes stronger. Temperatures rise, rainfall generally decreases, and the wines can become fuller, riper, and higher in alcohol. But even that is only a general outline. Altitude makes an enormous difference. Some vineyards climb to around 900 meters, where cooler temperatures and larger differences between daytime and nighttime conditions can slow ripening and help preserve acidity. The Sierra de Cantabria, rising along the northern edge of the region, also provides protection from cold, wet Atlantic weather. So Rioja isn't defined by one climate, it's defined by the meeting of climates. That diversity allows growers to work with different grapes and styles, and it's also made blending an important part of Rioja's history. Let's move through the region from west to east. Rioja Alta occupies much of the western part of the appellation. It includes the town of Haro, home to a famous concentration of historic wineries. The climate here has a relatively strong Atlantic influence. Tempranillo can ripen while retaining freshness, producing wines associated with red fruit, structure, balance, and aging potential. Haro became particularly important during the 19th century. Its railway station allowed wine to be transported more efficiently, helping the town become one of Rioja's major commercial centers. North of the Ebro, beneath the Sierra de Cantabria, lies Rioja Alavesa. Politically, it's part of Álava in the Basque Country, but viticulturally it belongs to Rioja. The vineyards often sit on slopes with calcareous clay soils. Tempranillo dominates, and the wines are frequently described as combining fragrance, freshness, and structure. Rioja Alavesa is also known for villages such as La Guardia, where underground cellars extend beneath the streets. These caves remind us that Rioja's wine culture didn't begin with large commercial wineries. Wine was made here for centuries through networks of families, farms, monasteries, villages, and local merchants. Continuing east, we reach Rioja Oriental, historically known as Rioja Baja. This is generally the warmest and driest of the three zones. Garnacha has deep roots here and can perform particularly well in the warmer conditions. Historically, wines from Rioja Oriental were valuable in regional blends because they could contribute ripeness, body, color, and alcoholic strength. Today, many producers are looking at the area differently. Rather than treating it simply as a source of blending material, they're emphasizing old Garnacha vines, individual villages, high-elevation vineyards, and distinctive local landscapes. That change reflects a larger movement within Rioja, a desire to tell us not only how long a wine was aged, but where it came from. Wine's been made in this part of Spain since ancient times. The Romans expanded viticulture through the Ebro Valley, while monasteries later helped maintain vineyards and preserve winemaking knowledge through the Middle Ages. The Camino de Santiago also passed through the region. Pilgrims traveling through northern Spain brought movement, trade, stories, and cultural exchange. The connection between wine, monasteries, and language becomes especially vivid through the poet Gonzalo de Bercheo. Bercheo was born near San Milan de la Cogolla in what's now La Rioja. Writing during the 13th century, he is generally regarded as the earliest Castilian poet known to us by name. Wine appears in his work with a wonderfully human touch. At the beginning of Life in Saint Dominic of Silas, Bercheo says that his poem will be worth, as he believes, un vaso de bon vino, a glass of good wine. It's a playful line, but it also tells us something about the place wine occupied in everyday culture. Wine wasn't only part of religious ceremony or agricultural trade, it was also a symbol of hospitality, pleasure, and reward. We can't know exactly what Bercheo's wine tasted like. It certainly wouldn't have resembled a modern Reserva or Gran Reserva, but the line connects Rioja's wine landscape with another major cultural development, the emergence of Castilian Spanish as a written literary language. In this part of Spain, wine and words were growing together. Rioja's transformation into an internationally recognized wine region accelerated during the 19th century, but it didn't happen through one single event. Several Rioja producers were already looking toward Bordeaux by the middle of the century. Luciano Murieta studied French winemaking methods, and Marqués de Riscal began producing Bordeaux-inspired wines in Rioja in the 1850s. These producers encouraged practices such as more controlled fermentation, careful cellar management, and maturation in small oak barrels. Later in the century, French vineyards suffered a series of crises. Powdery mildew appeared first, followed by phylloxera, the insect that devastated European vineyards by attacking the roots of Vitis vinifera. As French production declined, merchants crossed the Pyrenees in search of wine. Rioja was relatively close, increasingly connected by rail, and capable of supplying substantial quantities. The railway district in Haro became a center of this expanding industry. Wineries established cellars near the station, allowing barrels and bottles to travel more efficiently to markets throughout Spain and beyond. But this wasn't simply a story of France teaching Spain how to make wine. Rioja already had its own vineyards, grape varieties, local knowledge, and commercial traditions. What happened was a meeting between systems. Bordeaux-inspired cellar practices, French commercial demand, and improved transport interacted with Rioja's climate, grapes, and existing wine culture. Out of that exchange came many of the foundations of what we now recognize as classic Rioja. Phylloxera eventually reached Rioja too, forcing growers to replant with vines grafted onto resistant American rootstocks. By then, however, Rioja had already gained considerable international attention. Rioja became an official Spanish denominación de origen in 1925. In 1991, it became the first Spanish wine region to receive the higher Denominación de Origen Calificada status, commonly abbreviated as DOCA. The region became particularly famous for classifying wines according to maturation. The broadest and most flexible category is now generally called generic. These wines may be youthful and fruit-driven, but the category can also include ambitious wines that don't follow the specific aging rules required for Crianza, Reserva, or Gran Reserva. That's important because the official category isn't necessarily a simple ranking of quality. It tells us about how the wine was produced and matured. It doesn't guarantee how complex, expensive, or enjoyable the wine will be. For red Rioja, Crianza requires at least 2 years of aging, including at least 1 year in a 225-liter oak barrel. Crianza often represents a meeting point between fruit and oak. You may find cherry, strawberry, or plum alongside vanilla, toast, coconut, or sweet spice. Red Reserva must mature for at least 3 years, including a minimum of 1 year in oak and 6 months in bottle. These wines often show more integration and development, with the fruit beginning to move from fresh toward dried or preserved characteristics. Red Gran Reserva requires at least 5 years of maturation, including a minimum of 2 years in 225-liter oak barrels and 2 years in bottle. Gran Reserva wines are generally made only when the fruit and vintage are considered capable of supporting long aging. Their aromas may include dried cherry, fig, leather, tobacco, forest floor, dried flowers, spice, and balsamic notes. But more aging doesn't automatically mean a better experience. A vibrant Crianza may be perfect with dinner. A Gran Reserva may offer extraordinary complexity, but it may also show less obvious fresh fruit. The categories represent different expressions of time. Oak has played an enormous role in Rioja's identity. Traditional producers became especially associated with American oak, generally made from Quercus alba. American oak can contribute aromas of vanilla, coconut, sweet wood, dill, and spice. The coconut note is linked particularly to compounds known as oak lactones, sometimes called whiskey lactones. But the effect of oak depends on much more than species. Barrel age, toast level, seasoning, grain, wine composition, and length of contact all influence what we perceive. New barrels can contribute strong aromas, tannin, and wood-derived flavors. Older barrels may contribute much less obvious flavor while still allowing gradual oxygen exposure. That helps explain why a traditionally made Rioja can remain in barrel for years without necessarily tasting aggressively woody. The barrel isn't simply adding vanilla or coconut, it's creating an environment in which the wine slowly evolves. During barrel and bottle aging, color changes. Tannins can become softer, and fresh fruit gradually gives way to secondary and tertiary aromas. In Rioja, oak has often functioned as both a flavor source and a tool for transforming time into texture and aroma. Rioja's leading red grape is Tempranillo. Its name is related to the Spanish word temprano, meaning early, because it tends to ripen earlier than some other varieties. Tempranillo can produce wines with red fruit, moderate acidity, and structured but manageable tannins. Its expression changes with climate, altitude, yield, vine age, and winemaking. In cooler sites, it may show cherry, cranberry, herbs, and freshness. In warmer conditions, the fruit can become darker and riper. With oak and bottle aging, Tempranillo develops the familiar Rioja range of vanilla, tobacco, dried fruit, leather, and spice. But classic Riojas often a blend. Garnacha can add body, warmth, red fruit, and generosity. It's particularly important in Rioja Oriental. Graciano can contribute acidity, aroma, color, and aging potential. Mazuelo, known elsewhere as Carignan, can add tannin, acidity, and structure. Maturana Tinta is a historic local variety that nearly disappeared but has been recovered by a small number of producers. The traditional blend was a practical response to regional variation. Tempranillo might provide the central structure. Garnacha could add warmth, Graciano could lift the acidity and aroma, Mazuelo could strengthen the wine. Blending across different vineyards and zones allowed producers to build balance and consistency. Red wine dominates Rioja's image, but the region also produces white, rosé, and traditional method sparkling wine. The principal white grape is Viura, known elsewhere in Spain as Macabeo. Viura can produce fresh, relatively delicate young wines, but it can also support barrel fermentation and extended aging. Traditional white Rioja can be one of Spain's most distinctive styles. With time, these wines may develop aromas of dried apple, nuts, beeswax, chamomile, toast, and spice. Some examples can age for decades. Other permitted white varieties include Garnacha Blanca, Malvasia, Maturana Blanca, Tempranillo Blanco, Verdejo, Sauvignon Blanc, and Chardonnay. Tempranillo Blanco has an especially unusual story. It developed as a natural color mutation discovered on a red Tempranillo vine in Murillo del Rioleza in 1988. That single pale berried shoot was propagated and eventually authorized for wine production. Rioja also produces Rosado, ranging from pale contemporary styles to deeper, more structured versions. And traditional method sparkling wines are now produced under the regional category Espumoso de Calidad de Rioja. So, while Tempranillo remains the central character in Rioja's story, it's not the entire cast. For much of the 20th century, Rioja labels placed more emphasis on maturation than on precise vineyard origin. A producer might blend grapes from several parts of the region. Cooler areas could contribute acidity and aroma, while warmer vineyards supplied body and ripeness. That blending wasn't necessarily a compromise, it was part of Rioja's classic identity. More recently, however, producers and consumers have become increasingly interested in individual places. A wine may now be labeled as a vino de zona, identifying one of the three main zones. A vino de municipio comes from a named municipality or village. A viñedo singular comes from a recognized individual vineyard or group of parcels meeting additional requirements. These vineyards must be at least 35 years old and must meet standards related to restricted yields, hand harvesting, traceability, and additional quality evaluation. This geographical system doesn't replace Crianza, Reserva, and Gran Reserva, it adds another layer. A Rioja label can now help answer two different questions. How was the wine matured, and where did it come from? Those questions represent Rioja's two major identities. One is built around blending, cellar craft, and patient aging. The other focuses on vineyard, village, altitude, soil, and site. Many of Rioja's most interesting producers aren't choosing between the two, they're finding ways to combine them. Rioja's wine culture doesn't exist only in vineyards and cellars. It also appears in music, dance, and public celebration. The jota riojana is the region's traditional form of song and dance. Its verses often celebrate local towns, courtship, rural life, work, festivals, and regional pride. Some verses refer to agricultural work and seasonal cycles, including the grape harvest, while others celebrate towns, relationships, humor, and Riojan identity. Like many folk traditions, the lyrics aren't always fixed. They've been adapted and passed between performers and villages, making the jota a living expression of local identity rather than a preserved museum piece. The harvest also becomes a kind of public performance. During Logroño's Rioja Wine Harvest Festival, grapes are ceremonially trodden, and the first must is offered to the Virgin of Valavanera, the patroness of La Rioja. Music, traditional clothing, dancing, religious observance, and wine come together. What begins in the vineyard as agricultural labor becomes a public story about community and belonging. And Rioja's relationship with music hasn't remained confined to traditional songs. In 2024, Riojan songwriter Kema Purron released a song devoted specifically to Rioja wine. He said that, although he had written more than 800 songs during his career, he'd never previously dedicated wine to the product most closely associated with his home region. That modern song shows that Rioja wine isn't only a historical inheritance. It's still being reinterpreted by people who live among the vineyards today. The traditional jota and the modern popular song may sound very different, but they respond to the same question. What does Rioja wine mean to the people who call this region home? Rioja's relationship with culture can also be seen in the village of Briones, home to the Vivanco Museum of Wine Culture. The museum treats wine as something much larger than a beverage. Its collections include archaeological objects, winemaking tools, vessels, paintings, prints, sculptures, and modern art. The collection includes works connected with wine by artists such as Pablo Picasso, Juan Gris, Juan Miró, Antoni Tapies, Andy Warhol, Joaquín Sorolla, and Eduardo Chillida. Not all of those works depict Rioja itself, but displaying them in the heart of Rioja's vineyard landscape creates an important connection between the region's local wine culture and the much broader role wine has played in human art and imagination. Wine-related works by Picasso and the 2018 Vivanco exhibition devoted to his interpretation of Bacchus, Dionysus, and the classical world remind us that wine rarely has only one meaning. It can represent daily nourishment, agriculture, hospitality, pleasure, ritual, creativity, intoxication, or disorder. Bacchus embodies many of these contradictions. He's associated with fertility and cultivation, but also with theater, transformation, and the temporary collapse of ordinary rules. Wine shares that dual nature. It's the product of disciplined farming, scientific understanding, careful craftsmanship, and patient aging, but it's also linked with celebration, memory, imagination, and emotion. The Vivanco collection allows all those meanings to meet in one place, surrounded by Rioja's vineyards and cellars. Rioja's international reputation was built on grapes blended across a diverse landscape, matured patiently in barrel and bottle. That tradition remains alive. But Rioja is also becoming more precise about place. Producers are increasingly identifying zones, villages, and individual vineyards, allowing us to see differences that were once absorbed into regional blends. That doesn't mean the old system failed. The classic Rioja blend was itself a sophisticated response to geography. It recognized that different landscapes could complement one another. Today, Rioja gives us both possibilities. It can express the skill of blending or the identity of one vineyard. It can offer fresh fruit or decades of development. It can smell of cherries and violets or tobacco, leather, coconut, dried flowers, and earth. It can appear in a medieval poem, a folk song, a modern composition, a harvest ritual, or a Picasso still life. So, the next time you see Rioja on a label, look beyond the familiar words Crianza, Reserva, and Gran Reserva. Imagine the Ebro moving through the valley. Imagine the Sierra de Cantabria rising behind the vineyards. Think about Tempranillo supported by Garnacha, Graciano, or Mazuelo. Think about old barrels resting in underground cellars and individual vineyard names appearing on modern labels. And of course, find a bottle. Taste it, share it, and tell me what you discovered. You can also send me your feedback and suggestions for future episodes through the email address listed on the Wine Lab podcast page. Rioja isn't one wine style. It's a continuing conversation between place and blending, fruit and oak, youth and age, tradition and change. And every bottle chooses a slightly different place in that conversation. Until next time, stay curious. Cheers.